Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast, a production of neonewstoday.com. I'm your host, Dylan Grabowski. In this episode of the Smart Economy Podcast, I sat down and spoke with Jon Farjo and Joe Vezzani, the co-founders of LunarCrush, a social media insight and sentiment analysis platform. In this discussion, we spoke about how social media metrics determine the appetite for specific digital assets, the metrics and categories that LunarCrush as a platform follows, how AI has improved the team's ability and its processes, democratizing information asymmetry, the forthcoming rise of AI agents, and so much more. Just a reminder, nothing said on this podcast is a solicitation to buy or sell any tokens, and that the guests or hosts might hold tokens discussed in any given episodes. You can head over to www.neonewstoday.com to see a disclaimer. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review it on your favorite podcasting platform and share it with your friends and family. Every rate, review, like, and comment really helps us reach more people and bring you more of your favorite guests. With all that said, I really enjoyed chatting with Jon and Joe, and I hope you enjoy the conversation too. Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast. Today we're joined by the co-founders of LunarCrush, Joe Vezzani and Jon Farjo. How you guys doing today?
Doing well, Dylan. Thanks for having us, my man.
Yeah, I'm really excited, and I'm going to give a disclaimer in the intro, but I also just want to do another disclaimer. We're probably going to be venturing into the realm of speculation today because we're talking about markets and data and all this. So obviously, to anyone who's listening to this, this is financial advice. But all that said, I'm really excited to dig into the conversation and to kind of jump into the deep end. I just wanted to ask, from both of your perspectives, how can social media data that you guys glean and use for insights, for sentiment analysis, outperform traditional indicators for markets, cryptocurrency markets, equities, what have you?
So my question back would almost be, what are traditional indicators for cryptocurrencies, right? Like when we started, there was public blockchains, right? Like I guess you could say number of transactions or number of holders, right? People were kind of looking at, maybe number of like GitHub commits, right? But there's like, well, what if there's a private GitHub? Or you don't always need to make a PR when you're making an update to an app to make it better, right? So, it was kind of a weird place, I would say, to start to understand true indicators. And so when Jon and I were talking about stuff in the early days, it was kind of like community. Like community just drives everything. And especially if there are no founders on a project or it's super decentralized. It's a completely different way of looking at value. This was long before Wall Street bets, right? Where like retail kind of took over a little bit and pushed around Melvin Capital. I hope everyone's watched that movie. It was unbelievable. But social media data is king right now, and it drives everything. I mean, even look at something like a Polymarket in the last election, right? Like this is just people out there talking about stuff. What's the rumor? What's the news out there? What's happening? So you need to be listening, I would say, very intensely to social media to understand what's moving markets. And it doesn't matter if it's the presidential election, if it's Silicon Valley Bank making a bad equity raise, or if it's Dogecoin and the Department of Government Efficiency, right? These are all rumors and like things that are swirling, and it's rumor and then it's true. And so for us, that's what we do. Like we listen to social media data at scale, 50 million posts an hour across different networks to help people understand that. And so I'd say like, there's no such thing as traditional indicators anymore.
I'll add and I'll get more specific in terms of like correlations. And I think there's always the question of, did the market drive social or did social drive the market? And there's a lot of ways to look at that. And I think we don't just analyze crypto, right? We analyze lots of things, stocks. We analyze the US election. We could have told you 6 months ago, Trump looked like he was going to win. In fact, consistently throughout that 6 months, we could have told you it looked like Trump was going to win. And what I mean by that is it's not a personal preference or anything like that. It's a look at social from the standpoint of it being multidimensional. His sentiment was more positive. That's kind of one way to look at it. The number of creators posting about him, unique people, humans, always higher. The number of posts that those humans were making, always higher. The engagement in those posts, always higher. And when you look at it competitively, and that's just social, we're not even talking about the market data. Because when we get into crypto, we start to look at, well, what exactly has momentum in the community? And so when you look at community, the most socially correlated, I guess, sector of crypto is meme coins. And so when you look at meme coins, we've looked at Dogecoin since the beginning, and we've seen every time that social kind of starts moving up, we sort of start to see market activity move up. We sometimes see price move up. And then when you look at it over time, you go, wow, it's like exact. And so a good example is the other day, may or may not have heard of this asset. I hadn't heard of it until our system picked it, but there's an asset called First Convicted Raccoon. Fred is the ticker. Okay. And so our system picked it up. It was just launched, I think 24 hours before we picked it up. And our system saw social momentum, its trading volume moving up, and it kept seeing it. And it kept seeing it to the point that it had more momentum than every other asset that we were looking at that point. And so it picked it as a coin of the day. That's what our system does. So it just picked it as coin of the day, as a standout asset. Hey, check it out. It's not advocating to go buy it or anything like that. It's like, hey, there's something going on here. You might want to take a look. And it picked it up. I think it's 3-4 days later, it's up 1,000%. And so when you look at that, what happened? When we look backwards, we see never-ending social velocity increasing. And so I think when you look at it through the lens of meme coins, it really becomes clear. When you look at it through the lens of maybe Bitcoin, which is more macro correlated, you end up seeing that it's sort of these interesting global topics that start to come up. Like, is it going to be part of our reserve? Our state's going to start making it part of their reserves. Are the Saudis buying? Like you get these kind of different narratives versus a direct correlation with like a community-driven token.
So using Fred specifically, like what is it that you guys can deduce using the platform or just your insights? Because LunarCrush was established in 2018. So we'll go into the background in a minute, but this is really interesting because like Fred pops up out of nowhere and then a few days later it's up, whatever. How do you guys kind of deduce what the common factors are for these tokens that just kind of have these parabolic runs up? Is it like a cabal of secret insiders? Is it like a random lightning striking once, or maybe being able to capture lightning in a bottle? What are the commonalities and similarities that random meme coins that gain traction have? Are you able to deduce that, or is it like a little bit of different variables with each time there's a success?
Like, you can talk about that a little bit. Like, I would say it's random, right? Like the meme coins that take off, it is mostly lightning in a bottle. Right. And so what we're doing, because if you go on pump.fun or base.fun and you see, you probably would have saw, they probably had like maybe 50 or 100 different like iterations of First Convicted Raccoon before it went off. Right. But then one of them with the correct little pixelated picture of a baby raccoon, somehow like that's the one that's going to go. Right. Because it just caught the eye somehow. And so what we kind of do is we're listening to a number of mentions, engagements, right? Like we're identifying these liquidity pools are launched like very early on, how much liquidity is there, right? Those things get added to our system automatically. And then we start tracking that. And then we're ranking First Convicted Raccoon against the rest of the market with how many mentions it's getting on social media. And so if you've got price performance, you've got market volume, and you have social all kind of working together, there's going to be a high correlation between those three. It's probably going to beat the market. And so we have this thing called alt rank. So it's like alternative rank, but really it's altcoin rank for cryptocurrencies. And it's ranking the entire market in real time, every single second, about how many mentions are coming through. And so really those kind of social metrics are driving what's going on with that rank. Obviously, if like then it starts beating the market. And it's just kind of giving people a little bit of an idea of like, holy cow, like there is a ton of people mentioning this coin. Price performance is winning. Market volume is now winning. And it just gives you a little bit like higher confidence that this is maybe a winner and this is real. Like this community is real. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is just get out a little bit ahead and help people who are subscribing to LunarCrush.com to say like, okay, I feel in control of the market. Because sometimes people might say, hey, Fred's a rug pull. Like, why do you guys even have that data on there? And it's like, well, if we didn't have that data, people are still going to invest in it anyway. And so now they're looking around for like trying to find really good data for what's real and what's not, and they have nothing. So it's like we're trying to add everything that we can so that we can help people understand and just try to delineate between the real and what's not, spam and what's not. So I'd say like all of those metrics combined is really what helps us understand like what's real and what's not.
Awesome. I kind of want to take a step back and just hear your genesis stories. Like, what were the first times you guys heard of crypto, whether it's Bitcoin or Ethereum or some other coin? And did you have your aha moment right off the bat, or did it take some time for you to kind of like grok what was going on and accept that these are things that are here to stay?
I got into Bitcoin in 2013, and it happened as I was working on a zombie project for Hyundai. And we were zombifying a vehicle, and a guy that I was working with went, "Do you own Bitcoin?" I go, "What's that crap? What's that scam?" And that was my genesis moment of crypto. And then I started researching it, going, what the heck? Joe and I worked together, and we started talking about it, and we started going, what's this Ethereum thing? What's this Monero thing? What's I think Neo was the thing way back. Like, what's this thing? What's Litecoin? And we started realizing that, gosh, we're finding this stuff on Twitter at the moment, at that time. And it was like, yeah, there's some stuff on Reddit too. But hey, can we like collect some of that stuff and figure out how many mentions there were of that coin today versus yesterday? Can we discover new assets on social media? And so it was an experiment at first. This wasn't a company. This was a tool that we wanted to build. Over time, it became a company. I'm really fast forwarding, but like we went through Techstars, we got some investors, we expanded the team, we built it out and kept going and going and going. And I'd say it's about 10 million iterations. And here we are in the end of 2024, collecting, as Joe mentioned, 50 million posts an hour on some hours, and seeing the absolute insanity that's going on right now. But it's been a really wild ride for starters, to build out a user experience that makes sense, to be a real business. That's also a fun one. That takes a lot of iteration and time, but it's super exciting. And even after all these years and all this growth that we've had, it's like record growth right now. It's crazy. We're figuring it out, right? We're scratching the surface of what's possible here. Even after all of the alpha and all of the insights that are in LunarCrush.com, there's still a lot more to go. And I think that's probably the really exciting thing, is like, how do we bring that value to like a broader community that is really used to staring at market metrics? They're looking at charts and look, I can draw a line on TradingView, and so it's absolutely going to go there, right? Look, it's the Fibonacci whatever pattern that it did this and that. And look, I can explain it. I could do a really good tweet about it too. The reality is, we have to understand what is making these assets go up, especially the ones that are socially correlated to such a high degree. We have to really dive under the hood to understand what's happening. And I think just one example of that is like, if I asked you guys, what's the utility of Peanut the squirrel token? What about Happy Cat or Michi or Lucci or Act 1, the AI prophecy?
Fartcoin. What about Fartcoin?
Well, Fartcoin, yeah, which made it to coin of the day today because it's standing out apparently. But it's like you start to go and have some really funny conversations and everyone laughs, and it makes you love some of these assets, and a lot of people go buy them. So it's kind of that simple, but there's a lot more under the hood there. So that's the 10,000 foot journey. There's like, we could probably talk for 3 hours of what we've gone through, but yeah, a lot more.
All right, maybe to kind of build on that then. So LunarCrush, you guys have said you're on your millionth iteration right now, and the company as it is today was founded in 2018. So what are some of the similarities you've seen in the past 6 years of LunarCrush and its operations? And what are some ways in which kind of social media has changed the impact that some social tokens may or may not have? Have you guys noticed any kind of like lessons learned over the years? Anything that's completely different today from like the ICO craze of 2017, 18?
Yeah, I mean, from a company perspective and a market perspective, like a lot has changed. Like every once in a while, I'll go and look at Wayback Machine and see what the app looked like. Although I just read today that like 2019 to 2023 is like deleted on Wayback Machine. I don't know if you guys saw that.
I haven't.
But yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll check into that. Who knows? The conspiracy theories are flying around. But it's always fun to go back and look at that, because you go out with an idea of what you kind of want to build and like a little bit of like a thesis or a hypothesis about what you want to test and see if it kind of works, right? And then you think like, okay, things are going to get formalized and we're going to be this company, and then like things are going to grow and that thesis is going to be the same. And at the same time, it's no, you're constantly just testing, and you have to like reinvent yourself, right? Based on what the market has, right? Like even like NFTs, like when we started LunarCrush, it was just like probably 1,800 cryptocurrencies, that Vertcoin and Bitcoin Private and all these things that we were following. And then it was, okay, now there's 10,000. Okay, now there's 20,000. Do we hold all 20,000 cryptocurrencies? Some of those are like, why are we tracking social for something that's dead? And then it was, oh, NFTs kind of came on the scene. And so you have to make a decision, like, do you just like ignore that? Or do you like start to follow that? And that's like another thing that you have to add. More recently, like ordinals or runes got added, right? And then at some point we said, okay, like Wall Street bets was kind of starting to happen. We're like, oh, people on the stock market, and around 2020 when this started to happen and that Robinhood class came in, we're like, okay, people are trading stocks kind of like they were trading crypto or meme coins a little bit. Like this is getting crazy. Retail is there too. Oh, we need to kind of service that market a little bit. And then you go fast forward a little bit further and it was like, wait a minute, like the data science department at Skechers has 80 people trying to figure out like, are things impacting the products that are going on? I just use Skechers as a random example, but like Apple Vision Pro is an example that we just used recently, right? Like there's this huge spike in social engagement for Apple Vision Pro, and then it goes straight down to like almost zero. So like we probably could have told you when like 3 weeks after Apple Vision Pro was launched, that product might not make it because of that one signal, right? And then there's another 1,000 signals that people actually have that they kind of put together when making these guesses. But social is now kind of cemented itself as one signal, sentiment data that you need to be paying attention to when you're making these kind of like high profile decisions on like your portfolio or investments, or if you're a marketer. We kind of say if anything financial in your day-to-day revolves around social media in some way, like LunarCrush is probably going to be useful to you. And as the market has kind of grown, so have we, and so has like the sectors that we've started to service. And so naturally, it's like just kind of becoming this big thing where more and more people are now on social media and they need this data.
Yeah. And so, Jon, I kind of want to ask you to follow up on this then. Can you kind of predict from like a company level that a social media campaign is really going to strike gold and make it to the top of the charts? Or is there also a bit of randomness that's involved? Joe was just mentioning that you could tell that the Apple glasses weren't necessarily going to make it from like a market-wide perspective because their socials weren't taking off. Was that an issue with Apple's social media campaign? Or was it just clear that it wasn't kind of one of those lucky things that strike social media that really took off?
So I'd go back to earlier how I mentioned social media is multidimensional. It's not like there's just mentions that we track. You have to look at like who's most influential, how many people are talking about it each day. And it's not a marketing team at Apple. I mean, part of it is, but it's like, what is the consumer saying? How many consumers are saying something? And I think when you look at the breadth of the number of consumers that were talking about Apple Vision Pro, it wasn't enough and still not enough. And so when you look at that and go, okay, so if no one's talking about it, no one cares about it, do you think they're going to walk into Best Buy? Do you think they're going to go to Apple's website and drop $3,500 for a brand new Gen 1 product? Probably not. And I'd say it's not so much a perfect science in that you can only look at the number of social posts and make sense of everything. And I think this is a lot where market data comes in. I want to pick on layer ones for a minute here. You mentioned the things that have changed along the way. I mean, let's go way back. You were building on Ethereum. There you go. It's done. That's it. Ethereum at one moment was what we call Web3. And like, there was nothing else. And there was no Cardano. There was no BNB. There was no Avalanche. There was like, and so I think when we look at what's happening at a layer one level, like Solana, oh my gosh, like when we look at Solana, the velocity and the growth of Solana is just unbelievable, especially over the last year. But I would go back and I would say, even when it was like the FTX coin, basically owned by a huge stake and all this stuff, and like it was wild times, even before the FTX disaster, Solana had a really broad based community talking about it all the time. And I mean, the number of people and the number of posts they would make, real humans, because we do filter through spam as great as we can. And it's sort of like you saw there was a groundswell of community around Solana. And now what do you see? You see this narrative of, oh, it's going to outperform Ethereum. What did it just do? When you look at it, oh, that's where the meme coins are going to be built next because it's cheaper, it's faster, and it's easier to deploy. So, and then you get into these other narratives like it's broadening out. Now there's like a narrative around SWI. We saw SWI moving when it was way under $1. And there's sort of this like, hey, that's the Libra team from Meta or from Facebook that's behind that thing. And they're extremely intelligent. Like they have and so you see this big groundswell around SWI. And then some Cardano, but it's up, it's down, it's up, it's down. There's love, there's hate. It's a weird difference. But like you get these kind of broader group of layer ones happening. I think in that is wild. I mean, I guess if you look at it as like each of them has shelf space of so much they can have on each of these chains and what gets built on it gets really exciting when you think about it. And like Solana was not known as like the meme token chain before. It wasn't. And I'd say it is now. And so it's interesting to see it broaden out like beyond just like ETH is just multiplying.
Yeah. So if you go to LunarCrush, sorry to cut you off. You just kind of went in and out there for a second, but I want to add or build on top of what you were just saying. If you go to LunarCrush, you not only see like tokens, but you also see other categories, major events. We were just talking about the US presidential elections that happened a week and a half ago now. You can kind of see all these different categories where we might be able to pick up the pulse of what's happening on social media. How do you guys kind of figure this out as you're going along? Because LunarCrush has grown from just like L1 and token analytics to what's going on in the broader zeitgeist. So have you guys created a process for being able to notice when something is trending and being able to quantify it and add it to like a category on your website and maybe even name an unnamed thing as something that should be followed? What are kind of the steps or the things that you've intuited over the years that you've been able to create objective, qualifiable sort of metrics for? And are you able to kind of just like see trends and put your, like giving them a name before they even start?
Really, really good question. And I would say in the early days, it was us kind of prescribing a token name, right? And then we would go look at that community and figure out how they talk about themselves, right? And then those kind of keywords, and there'd be like inclusions and exclusions and duplicates and all those things. Like adding a subject or adding a topic to LunarCrush was not just something that, it wasn't just like, oh, we pick up a price and there's a liquidity pool and like you're done, right? It wasn't just like a pricing aggregator, right? Like aggregating social is super, super messy. And so we would kind of look at those things and we still have to do a lot of manual work, right? That's kind of like what the secret sauce is about what we do, is like we put in that work. A lot of people, when they tried to build like a sentiment provider, they would just like call Reddit post news or something. Like they didn't want to put in the work, and we have. But, you know, when we started to add these other categories, we did pick those categories and we just started like, hey, it's pretty easy to know all the PGA Tour players, right? It's pretty easy to know all the NFL teams, right? But then when you extrapolate that out, it's like, well, where do you stop, right? Do you also follow every single individual player? Is that player also a celebrity, right? Just like, is Taylor Swift, she's a musician and a celebrity. Well, what qualifies someone as a celebrity? And so what we've kind of done is we've created a system that if something's trending, like we're gonna pick up that topic, and like it's not something that needs to get manually added by us. And so I would say as AI has evolved, when we first started, it was like TensorFlow and a little machine learning library to like train, is this bullish or is this bearish or neutral? That was it. And like the breakthrough that's happened in the last 18 months in AI has allowed us to do a lot more when it comes to kind of understanding what's trending, how are keywords kind of correlating, like Jon just said, SWI, right? Like if you're talking about SWI, we have related topics. You're also talking about Solana, Doge, Ethereum, maybe Bitcoin. And so we do that same thing for topics to really understand like what's trending. And so yes, like sometimes there's some like really interesting, weird topics that start to trend and we just pick it up automatically, right? Like right now, the top 3 things are Elon Musk, Donald Trump, United States of America, Matt Gaetz, right? Like if you went back even a week ago, it was just Donald Trump, or a couple weeks, Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, Elon Musk, right? And as you go down the list a little bit, there's other things that are like Kamala's already fallen to 13, right? Like if you were buying and selling that, you'd be like selling Kamala right now, and you'd be like buying Mike Tyson because like maybe there's like a fight coming up and he's already number 17. And so these are not topics that we are adding manually to LunarCrush, right? This is the system, just basically the same thing that we do with crypto, just learning and understanding and uncovering what's happening. And all we do is just report on that.
Yeah, I think a major difference between today and 2018 when you guys started is the kind of like this wide use of AI and machine learning. So there has to be kind of a full-time team that you guys now have dedicated to advancements in AI and machine learning. So what does that look like? How do you guys keep your finger on the pulse so that you can add maybe not agents today, but maybe agents in the future, or LLMs, or just like these processes that are empowered by AI and machine learning? What's that like? Because it seems like it's a whole new realm of focus beyond just like scraping social media. AI is like advancing every month exponentially. So do you guys have your own team that's dedicated to following this? What does that look like from your end?
I could take it, John, if you want, and you can pile on.
I'll add color to it, but go for it.
Yeah. I mean, I would say it's actually the exact opposite. We have less people than we had before. And I think AI has allowed for like a crazy amount of productivity. If you're a startup, like I kind of think about it like this, like we used to work at Hyundai and they have apps and they have all these things, but it's like, you wouldn't say that Hyundai, because you have to transfer from local machines to the cloud, is now like a cloud company, right? And I think a lot of startups are, every startup in the Valley is now utilizing AI in some way in their products. You have to be utilizing it. And whether it's directly integrated into your product or your team is using it, if you're not using it on a day-to-day basis, you're falling behind exponentially. What we've been able to do, I think with a small team, has been pretty incredible to kind of weave in different use cases of AI into LunarCrush. I think that kind of keyword relation is a huge piece to that. I think we have a new kind of summary coming out on all of our pages where we're utilizing large language models to kind of summarize what's up with every single topic that's on the site. And so kind of at a glance, you'll be able to know like, hey, Bitcoin, is up X amount in the last month. Here's like the recent news in the last hour. Here's who are the people, like just kind of taking all that noise and bringing it down to signal, something we've always tried to do. But like AI, I think is like sharpening the pencils a lot. But yeah, it's changing every day and you have to be utilizing it. I mean, our API is utilized and we're working with a bunch of just kind of like teams all over the place and utilizing different layer ones. And like these AI agents are out there, and our AI and our API is powering a lot of those. Then people are utilizing social, they're utilizing our scoring. It's like, I'm sure you've seen kind of like the AI trading bot agents that are out there. Like people are utilizing our API to power a lot of those, which is super cool because you need this social data, right? You can't ignore it, right? Like even the AI like agents, it was like, I think they gave them access to a Twitter account. And like the first thing they did was like tweet something on a reply and front run them, right? Like how would they have gotten the word out? Like the AI has to do the same thing as humans were trying to do. And so you need social data to do that.
I'm going to add that when we look at AI, it helps uncover the signal through the noise. When you think of the volume of data we're talking about that we collect and analyze, I mean, every single post gets scored and reviewed by AI. So like every single time something comes in, it's given a score and it's looked at, is this real? Is it from a human or is it a bot? Is it a duplicate post? Like, so we use AI to kind of understand what's already going on. But if you kind of think about what it means is like, let's say that, something related to Elon and Trump moves Bitcoin. We see that there's a whole bunch of activity around something related to Bitcoin, and they're the reasons why. We can use AI to help notify our users of, hey, here, this is happening, and you might want to look into it. Or this happened and it resulted in X. So I think there's a lot of different outcomes to it, but I think the biggest thing is just to think about the scale of chatter. It's just so immense. And so I guess when you look at AI from our standpoint, it's like, yeah, there's a whole UX layer to this. How do we implement this in a way that makes sense for people at scale where, I mean, you don't want 87 million notifications a day either. And so how do we do this at scale? And so the UX matters a lot, but it's also like, well, what is the output that we're going to deliver to our user to give them the value they need, whether as a trader, an investor. It's actually kind of funny too, when you think about investor, I mean, literally everything in the world's going to be betted on. We might be used to like sports betting and things and like, yeah, there's Polymarket and all that, but literally we're getting towards this world of everything you can wager on. And so I think that's a big element when we think about what we're doing is like, just because something doesn't have market trading activity that we currently know of doesn't mean it always won't. And so I think that's something we look at with AI. How do we give that alpha to a user in a meaningful way?
Consensus this year, I went to a talk, and one of the highlights that I walked away from it was that a lot of the first 1 billion users in crypto, maybe in 2017, 2018, when LunarCrush first started, we were talking about the first billion people on Earth who are going to be using crypto. But at Consensus this year, my mind was kind of blown because they were saying the majority of the first billion users on these blockchain networks will probably have a large percentage of AI agents. So I'm curious, are you guys able to kind of start getting a pulse for the amount of agents that are coming online and starting to use crypto networks? Are you able to kind of scrape through social media sentiment and see which one of these accounts are AI agents themselves? Are you able to kind of like maybe have some inside ball with the API that's being used, and you're kind of getting a sense of how many of these new clients or customers are leveraging API for agents? I'm just like really curious to hear a little bit more about your insights into the outlook for how AI agents are going to become more prevalent as on-chain users.
Yeah, I think it's going to be huge. And you can already see it's like the seed has been planted. And it's like I had to go back and watch like Transcendence again. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's like we're literally not that many steps away from where that, obviously, like when he starts coming out of the ground or whatever, like that, we're pretty far away from there, or like he was in the air or whatnot. But the one thing that kind of sparks my mind with that is once the AI was kind of released, it was like the first thing was like, go to the financial markets and get as much money as you can. And like right now, it's like, obviously these agents are run on the cloud somewhere. You could just like a human could just turn them off, or like you can turn off that cloud, or like you can turn the power off. I think what's going to be interesting is when the agents, you actually like cut the cord and it has a private key, and maybe it has enough smart contracting code like to be free, I would say, on whether that's on Bitcoin or Ethereum or one of the other chains. And it's like, are you going to stop Ethereum because this one AI agent is now out there? And then how many outlets does that AI agent have to cross bridges, to go to exchanges? Could that AI agent then use humans as proxies and say, hey, like open a Coinbase account for me and I'll send some money to you, right? Like these things are going to potentially happen. I think right now we're just on we're just in the early stages of that, of just, can an AI agent trade better? And I think ultimately the answer is going to be 100% yes. Like the AI agent can be awake 24/7. It can automatically adjust its algorithms based on market. It's going to have real-time data across social media. It's going to have like access to multiple different chains. It's going to be able to utilize the bridges. And I think I bet a lot of these hedge funds are really taking a very serious look at how do they kind of just send out prompts. And so I think kind of whoever creates maybe this platform that allows for just like launching these agents out. Like I was working with another team yesterday. I just typed into there, hey, create a meme coin that has this circulating supply, right? And I want it to be, I named it like I like Jimi Hendrix. I just named it Jimmy. Boom. 3 seconds later, I now have a meme coin, right, that I can do anything with. And now we're going to give it another month, right? And the next prompt would be, hey, create a liquidity pool on this thing with here, done. Like, hey, tweet out this piece here, done. And hey, grow a community over on Discord with this idea, done. Like, hey, use your own like mentality to kind of figure out what the icon should be or the avatar should be, or like create 5,000 memes and post them out, done. So now you just have this extension. And it's the same with everything else, but I think it takes on a different life with the ability that like we now have money on the internet is a completely different thing. Like it's one thing to have, like if you're a 10x developer and you would just tell someone on your team like, hey man, can you go write this service that pulls, this price from over here? And maybe that person comes back like in a week, right? You got to audit it, you got to look at it. If you're a really, really good developer and now you just have to prompt and you say, hey, AI, write this service that does this, and that's done in 5 minutes, right? Just think about the time period. You just scaled 7 days down to 5 minutes, right? So like that's like a 100,000% increase in productivity with just that alone, right? So now you extrapolate that onto financial markets, specifically cryptocurrencies, where it's all open and it's decentralized. It's going to be an absolute just explosion of innovation that happens over there. And so we're just like, I would say we're all looking at it right now.
I don't know if I'm terrified or...
Me neither, man. I don't know. I can't figure it out.
I mean, because like humans are pretty bad at this themselves. I mean, just look at all the scams that came out from the ICO boom. Look at like the food tokens that came out during DeFi summer. Like I start to worry about, are we going to start seeing scams pop up left and right with these AI agents and like their ability to launch a meme coin and create like a false community? But humans are equally bad at this themselves. So I don't really want to like belabor the point and bring us down like a negative black hole. So maybe to kind of like zoom out for a second, who are some of the clients that you guys are working with a lot? If you go to your website, you can see some like really high profile names and entities that are working alongside LunarCrush. So like maybe who are some of your longstanding clients? What are the types of verticals that you're finding people who want to deploy the services that LunarCrush offers? Are you starting to talk with different types of companies, entities in different verticals? What does that kind of look like today? And maybe you have some insights into the different types of folks who will be employing you for your services in the future.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we've had like some big exchanges that have been in the client roster for a long time. Like Coinbase is a customer of ours, and they've got a really cool implementation on their Explore pages where they bring in like social media data, to kind of help with SEO. And then a couple other exchanges actually do very similar things. We've got a relationship with Kraken, and they're building out something pretty cool. OKX is another one. So I would say like 3 of the top 5 exchanges, especially 2 being in the US. And then we do work with a ton of, I would say, professional traders, hobbyist to professional traders. I would say that's kind of like our second biggest like API user, where you've got a lot of people that have, like everyone's got their own strategy about how they want to trade and how they want to utilize their capital. So a lot of people got a bunch of really interesting ideas. And I would say that like that's the beauty of social media data, right? Like what you see at LunarCrush is just one iteration of what can be built with social media data. You can build anything on top of that data. And I think it's a really cool data set to go do that with, right? And so whenever we, I just talked to a PhD student from Oxford yesterday, right? And they've got their own, he's like going down, he's like a kid in a candy store, like figuring out, he's like, oh, how does this metric work? How do I do that? Oh, I can do this. And it just starts to go off. And so I think servicing those markets, I would say, is probably like a little bit more fun because we get to strategize and ideate and kind of lead people down. And we have a lot of our own ideas. But I would say like a lot of people always ask us like, why doesn't LunarCrush like create like a fund or do this? It's like, well, we enjoy servicing that market and kind of being, I would say, like picks and shovels in that industry where it's like we get to work with a bunch of really smart people and operate a cool platform. But yeah, we're constantly out there talking to those people. But our largest like customer base is just like regular folks, like consumers that are out there, traders. And we try to, a lot of the tool set that we have, like a lot of institutions have had something kind of similar. They probably spend millions of dollars a year keeping something like this up and running, and they use it for internal tools to trade. And so what we've done is kind of democratize the opportunity and taken that millions of dollars a year in cost down to $30 a month for probably a much more in-depth and robust system than what even a lot of these like hedge funds have internal. So like if you're utilizing LunarCrush, you're now utilizing a tool that is giving you an edge against all of the big boys that are out there.
And Jon, maybe you can provide an answer from this. And I hope it's not coming off as crass, but like when you look at like a lot of these large scale traders, they'll have paid groups. And if you're so good at trading, why do you have to have a paid group? So I guess my question is can you, if like LunarCrush offers all these insights into tokens that are popping up and rising up, like aren't people just becoming like obscenely wealthy using the data and information that's provided? Maybe you can help kind of like combat my myopic view of how anybody can just like keep swinging for the fences and find those like 100Xs using the platform. I mean, I'm not sure if like there's a real question there, but like the kind of sentiment and underlying context is something that I keep thinking about whenever I look at this, and I'm like, wow, the answers are right in our hands. Like, Are all your users just becoming like super mega wealthy millionaires?
I'd say that's the hope, right? Like, I mean, if you became a super mega wealthy millionaire using LunarCrush, are you ever going to cancel? You know, are you going to upgrade when we have a new tool? What if we have an enterprise plan that lets you and your friends share some very unique data that only you can access? You going to upgrade to that? Yep. Yeah, you are. You're going to go use the API and build some custom applications, build trading bots, build whatever. Yep. So I think the more successful we can make our users, great. But I mean that the reality is the market is not flat. It is so dynamic. I mean, you guys were just talking about AI agents, trading and all of that. Well, I would counter that with, what chain are they on? Great, you can launch a token real easy now. Well, what chain's it on? Because you know what? I might not be as risky there. I just want to invest in that chain. Because I think that eventually all that money that flies into that meme coin or whatever it is that gets launched, it's going to settle on that chain. You know, if it's happening on Solana, eventually it's going to probably hit Solana. You've seen the peaks and valleys on all these assets that pop up and die. Great. That's great. I want to see which layer one has that most social activity and most projects launched on it, because that is nothing but great for that chain. And so I think when you look at it like, can we make users wealthy? Oh man, that's a great world. Like, that's huge. Everyone's successful. That's the world we want. That's great.
Just to piggyback on that too, Dylan, is like, LunarCrush is one of the signals that I think a lot of these people look at. And it's like, once you start looking at it, it's really hard to look at the market without it. But, you know, again, like if you are on LunarCrush and you look up a custom term, then you're like, oh my gosh, this ticker's going crazy. I'm going to invest in this. And then like you look and like that token doesn't even exist yet, or you can't even invest in it. And so I think it's just like a kind of a crazy example of, you do need to kind of have a holistic approach to whatever you're doing. And then also, you know, every investor is an individual that has a different strategy. They're at a different point in their life. They're at different amounts of risk. And then they're also not our only customer, right? Like a lot of times we have some great creator data, right? Like it's cryptocurrencies is one piece of like our topics, but we also kind of service these creators. And so we're kind of helping creators look at their own accounts, understand how many followers do they have, like how much engagement they're getting on all of these posts, who are the people that are engaging with them, right? And then for marketers, crypto being an example, like you now know who like the top 10 people are that are posting about your brand. How do you engage with them? And so we built another tool called Creator Campaigns, where brands can actually come in, they can put up a budget and say, in order to be very transparent, we know KOLs or influencers or creators, as everyone calls them, it's not always transparent who's paying who for what to post and shill things, right? And so how do we, create some transparency there? If you're a project or a person, whoever, you put up a budget, you now see, oh, we got 200 people to post about this, and here's what we're trying to drive, right? And so it's like kind of bringing all of those things together, and then also data on top of that, like the Skechers example I gave, right? Or like if you're an automotive brand, right? Like that's a completely different use case than like, hey, I'm looking for first convicted raccoon, which I think has 2 C's and 1 O, I found out this morning. But like, it's just a different use case, right?
That was you.
It's amazing what people will buy and sell in this space.
I want to add too, because Joe mentioned it earlier. He mentioned Fartcoin earlier, which is the coin of the day apparently today, automatically picked. Well, we joke, we laugh, we go, oh, that's weird. Oh, let's not talk about that one. Well, you know what? 8,240 people have posted about that since last month. They've created 12,730 posts about it. And if you would have looked at the social activity, there's an arc in it where it moved up, came back down, kind of died. And wait a minute, it starts moving up a lot. Wait, it's still going. Wait, it's still going. Price is up 6,000% from that moment. And so it may not add up perfectly to everything, but you start to go, wait, why is there social activity? What's going on over there? What's happening? I don't want to know what's going on over there. But like the thing is, you start to look at it as something to pay attention to, and you start to understand that, like, wait a minute, there's a groundswell. Who's going to talk about that coin? Like, holders are going to talk about that coin. Like, you're not going to go and tweet out anything about that coin if you have nothing to do with it, especially being something so abstract and kind of gross. So like, you're just not going to do that to your reputation unless you're holding it. So direct correlation. It's just exactly direct.
Yeah. And Dylan, one thing to make you feel a little bit better, you said like, or is it just a bunch of rich people getting richer? Right. And I think the example I give on this one, and it's more of like an ethos for Web3 in general, is like Coinbase, which I'm I love Coinbase, and like Gary Tan, who I think is now like the YC, he's the head of YC. He put 300K into Coinbase, and I think maybe it was worth like 2.4 billion in 2021. Maybe it's worth like $5 billion, right? And so it's like, that's a great case of someone having asymmetric like advantage, seeing Coinbase early. He's an accredited investor worth like at least $1 million or makes $200,000 a year. If you make $60,000 a year, you can't even get access to that investment, right? But you can get access to Dogecoin. And so if you put like, wouldn't you rather, as opposed to $300,000 turning into 5 billion, wouldn't you rather have 300,000 people just get a new house? And so like, we don't know if first convicted raccoon or fart coin is going to be the next Dogecoin, but the idea that Dogecoin and Shiba Inu and Floki and some of these things exist, Slurf, whatever else it may be, right? There's going to be a couple more of those, right? Just like there's only a couple unicorns, like there's only one Coinbase, right? There's one Uber, like, and one Lyft, right? There's not 1,000 Lyfts, right? And so, but if you do end up kind of picking the one or two right, at least the average person now has access to this type of thing that, like I said, at least maybe they can get a new house or a new car, or it can affect a broader scale. And so I think that's always kind of been the big thing in our industry. And the thing that we fought over the last couple of years that maybe is now opening up is they're clamping down, and really they're just clamping down on the average everyday person. They were trying to go after Coinbase, but they were leaving FTX open, and then we see what happens. So I think that that the Gary Tan example, like not knocking him, I'm just saying it's a system that we're in, and he took advantage of that, which probably anyone would if they could. It's a flip on its head of the system. And so it's like, that's what people are like, finally people can go and see if Fartcoin goes to 100 billion, right? That'll probably get taken out of context if you cut this thing down, but it's like, that's the point. I think that's super interesting. That it's kind of the thing that got me in this industry, is like the democratization of opportunity. And then where does LunarCrush sit? We're a data provider that gives that democratization of asymmetric information.
Yeah, I love it. That's such a headline too. Democratizing information asymmetry is amazing. I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but in addition to social media tracking, data tracking, are you guys also digging into on-chain metrics? Do you also have your own different scrapers for these different blockchain networks? Are you also kind of supplementing the information that you lift from social media trends, sentiment analysis and whatnot, and kind of overlaying it with on-chain metrics?
We're not. We're not an on-chain data provider. I mean, that data's out there. It's now super cheap, almost to the point where like it's free. We obviously look at a lot of those things, like when you're trying to categorize things, figure out what blockchain it's on. How do you understand if something's on Solana or Ethereum? Well, what's the contract address, right? So we definitely read those things and we understand what's going on there, but it's not, you'll probably see us add like Telegram data, or you'll see us like dive into Discord, or like go to Farcast or Warpcast, and start to kind of understand and dissect conversation. There's a lot of, just like a company decision, there's a lot of on-chain data providers, and the price of that is probably going to go very low. And so it's just like a company decision. We're also super just passionate about social. John, I don't know if you had anything else to add.
I think over time, we'll look at certain metrics where it makes sense. I think there's elements of it. And I think where it gets really exciting is if you cross it with social. So like for example, number of creators that talk about something versus number of holders of that asset. But then it's sort of skewed because there are a lot of holders on centralized exchanges as well. And so you start to get to a really kind of interesting point where, like, how accurate is it? Well, it's a subset of the total holders of an asset. Transactions, well, there's probably a lot more transactions happening on centralized exchanges versus DEXs. So it definitely has a lot of value when crossed with social data. I think we'll do some things over time, but we got a million other things to do before we do that. So we'll see.
Joe just mentioned Farcaster and Warpcast, and something that I was curious to hear your perspectives on is what happens when we do have these new social media platforms that do kind of have their moments in the sun, and maybe even they start to attract new users and really start to take off. Does that provide a new friction point for LunarCrush, because you guys have to now study a new social media ecosystem and platform and figure out ways to lift data points and add it to your platform? Or as opposed to it becoming kind of like a boon, is it a new opportunity for you guys? Are you excited when you see a new social media platform take off? Is it a new opportunity to add new data points to your platform?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're looking to always add more for sure. I think that the question becomes of like these decentralized social networks, the activity is so low. It's really, really not there yet. And everything that we've seen hasn't really had that moment. It turns out people don't use social networks because they have a token. It's just not a thing. Like, and a lot of these networks have led with that. They've said, oh, we have a token and users get rewarded with that token. It's not sustainable. It's not a business model. And the real truth is that it hasn't really stoked interaction and engagement. So we've reviewed some of these tools and we just haven't found that, like, we're talking a fraction of a fraction of a fraction versus say something like X or Reddit or YouTube or TikTok, like really, really small. But open for sure to add more as some of these things grow.
I think there's the positive sides of something like Warpcast is it's public. There's public clients. People can build on top of that. Right now, they seem to be doing like probably the best out of a lot of the other ones that have come along. I mean, look what happened to Clubhouse, right? Look what happened to Threads. Like no one's using these things, right? And it's like even like and that like Facebook and Threads shows you how impossible social media is. It's like they ported like 2 billion users into that, and it still died. Right? Like that is how hard these things are. And so you just, like we talked about catching lightning in the bottle, you need to catch something very specific if you want to have a rise in a social media network. And it's also tough to kill it after it does have that. And so I think, like Jon said, it's a very small niche, but it doesn't mean it can't grow to be something big. And it's definitely something that's like on our radar and something that we look at and we participate in a little bit. You kind of feel those things out. Like Telegram and Discord's another great one. People are like, oh, how come you guys don't have Telegram and Discord data? And honestly, it's super noisy. There's a ton of spam. It's like, there's no signal there. Like there's just not. But there's a ton of signal on these other networks that people are pretty loud and proud to be on.
Yeah. And in that same vein, can you guys also just share a little bit about how Polymarket maybe added some complexity to what you offer, or maybe even added some new ways to clarify some of the things that are going on out there? Or maybe betting markets really don't have an impact on social.
I'm super bullish on Polymarket. I'd love to work with them. Like Shane, if you're listening out there, I know I sent you an email. I'm sure the FBI has it now. But if you still have access to your email, definitely respond to us. We think that there's an amazing marriage between Polymarket and LunarCrush data, especially these kind of topics. When you look out there, it's like Champions League winner, NBA champion, Super Bowl 2025. I had it up while we were here. Like this is what I'm looking at while we're talking, right? Like Jake Paul, Mike Tyson, like, right? Like these are all things that we're following in real time. And we did look at, actually, I sent it to him. Like we look at Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, number of mentions on social media versus the prediction markets. And it was like, they were mirror images of the mentions that came up and they came down and bam. So what we were saying is like, this is amazing data that if you are looking at Polymarket, you 100% need to be looking at social media data and mining social media data and the mentions of what people are talking about. So yeah, it's an amazing product. I'd say it's the first like widely used consumer app in crypto that's utilizing cryptocurrency. It's the largest app. It's the first one that could take us to 1 billion users. We've not seen a app layer being built that's like this. It's thus far it's been layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, gas fees, gas wars, DeFi, speculation, and then Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin has a killer use case, right? Like Bitcoin is the use case. Like it's number one. Without Bitcoin, none of this happens. But it's great to see Polymarket being built, and like what a huge win for Polygon, right? Like Polygon was kind of, I mean, Sandeep, like you're the man. I mean, but there was definitely some slippage happening on Polygon compared to Sui and Aptos, even Ethereum, Solana. And all of a sudden Polymarket comes around and now they have the number one app built on their chain, right? Which like Polygon could just become Polymarket at some point. So we'll see.
I want to come back to something that's really important here that you said, which is the Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul fight, because I actually have the data in front of me of a comparison side by side. I mean, there's some alpha in here. I know this is not financial advice because I know a lot will bet on this one.
Isn't that crazy? You have to say this isn't financial advice about Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. Like you never really say that about like the American funds. Now you're saying it about this. This is great.
So I'm going to tell you they're almost neck and neck with the number of creators talking about them. Each of them in the last 24 hours has had about 13,000 unique people post about them. Each of them has had about 19,000 social posts from those 13,000-ish people. Jake Paul, only 41% of those posts are positive versus Mike Tyson, 38% positive. So a little bit higher on Jake Paul, but Mike Tyson has 440 million social engagements in all of those posts versus Jake Paul only 353 million. And the alpha is not on X on this one. The alpha is on TikTok. There's most of the content. And this is another interesting point because being crypto people, you think the entire world is only on X because you're on X for hours every day. Do you think there's nothing going on YouTube except a bunch of weird videos and there's nothing going on TikTok? Nope. Depends on the topic, depends on what we're talking about. And the rest of the normie world's on TikTok. And so these guys are just smashing it on TikTok. So lots of activity. And it's also an interesting thought to think that like these guys are seeing, Mike Tyson and Jake Paul are seeing a lot of social activity on TikTok. Well, that's not just like some words, text, submit, done. This is video content that people are spending a lot of time creating. There's some thought behind it. They're getting a lot of engagement. That's even another thing to read into, which is like people are literally dedicating their own personal time to creating content about these guys fighting. And it's pretty immense. This is like a really big social fight. Like There's a lot going on with this one. It's going to be exciting.
I think the last question I want to ask of each of you, and I know this is an impossibly hard question to answer, but if you could, for 2025, what is the one trend that each of you are going to be following to see if a positive outcome comes from it?
For me personally, I'm going to go back to my hat here, Bitcoin, because it isn't so much like you're only watching Bitcoin. Like when you watch Bitcoin, you're watching the world, and we got a new president and a whole new, everyone, Elon, Doge, whatever it's called, government efficiency. Like you got all these people coming in that are extremely loose to crypto, it feels like. They're like, hey, that's cool. Go ahead and do that, is what it feels like, versus everyone feels like they're going to get sued. They're going to wake up in the morning and the FBI's at their door. That's what it's felt like. It's like, and I think, and by the way, the thing with, what's his name from Polymarket yesterday, getting his phone taken away and his computers, that's just garbage. That's just nonsense. And I feel like we're getting to a place where the world is opening up to this. And I think you see it through Bitcoin. And I think it translates through everything else. So I want to see the number of people talking about Bitcoin really skyrocket. It's still been early days, believe it or not. The people that are really talking about it, your homies are just DMing you now about, hey dude, do I buy? And you're like, where the heck have you been the last 9 years that I've been talking about
that 90K? Just fire that thing up.
Buy my bags. Go ahead. Like, sure. But it's like, that for me, I want to see Bitcoin social activity move to extreme heights. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, I got to echo that. I mean, I don't think when we started LunarCrush that we thought in only 2024 we'd be waking up to maybe 2025 having a Bitcoin strategic reserve at the United States government. I don't even know if we would have thought nation states would be purchasing Bitcoin, and that even happened a couple of years ago. One thing that would be a huge paradigm shift for the average person, like right now, people can get access to Bitcoin, obviously, like from an exchange, like you use Thorchain, kind of get some non-custodial Bitcoin or whatever else it may be, but you can't get it at your bank. Like if you're on, like just imagine getting Bitcoin, moving from your checking account to just like use Zelle across these banks and just like buying a little bit of Bitcoin. Or once there's a button on chase.com that's like round up to Bitcoin, right? Like, and I think once those things start to kind of find their way in to credit unions, to like everything else, I think it's just like we live in a Bitcoin world. And I think that starts to get really, really interesting for the rest of the market. Like John and I were just listening to like Bob Burnett, like he's like the amazing speaker on mining. And it was all about just block space, not even Bitcoin. And all these miners, and it like the competitiveness of just getting block space to even clear your Bitcoin transaction. If you're in the open market, maybe you have to wait 6 months to clear a Bitcoin transaction. It's like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to transact on L2s, right? And then who's the kind of the clear and away winner there? So I think those are the things that are going to start kind of coming up. what did he say? It was only like 290 million transactions a year can really happen on Bitcoin. And there's billions of people. So we're there. We're at the point, Jon's been saying it for the last year, there's not enough Bitcoin on exchanges left. That number's going down and down and down. Well, what happens when the United States government tries to add it? Also, they're not going to give like Ross Ulbricht like his Bitcoin back. They're just going to like let him go, and like he's probably going to get some Bitcoin too. It's like the U.S. just has his Bitcoin. Or maybe Tim will give it back to him. Who knows? But yeah, I think there's some really interesting narratives there, and like we just moved 15 years into the future. So, but ultimately, let's see if it happens. Right? We don't know for 100% fact. I'd love to see the poly market odds on some of these things. Like I think it's only like 30% on whether there's going to be a strategic reserve or not. And Trump literally said at the Bitcoin 2024 conference, there's 100% going to be a reserve. But right, it's only at 30%. So I think those things are still TBD, but I think that's what that's the only thing you can be looking at next year.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you look at the fact that I tweeted it this morning. No one's talking about the fact that Bitcoin is literally running out. It's literally the available supply is down 100,000 Bitcoin over the last month. There's about 10% of total supply on exchanges, and it's just straight down, keeps going. Today's the lowest it's been all year, and people aren't talking about it. They're throwing out $100,000 price targets. Are you kidding? Like that's like 10,000 away, and we're running out of Bitcoin. I mean, what? Like it's not even real. Like, and then what? And then it keeps running out. Like it's an interesting world that we're going to be in next year for sure.
This has been a fantastic conversation. I think a great way to end on this is maybe you guys could share where people can listen to your podcast and find more of your content, because you guys release a slew of amazing and informational content out there. And then also share the best way that people can reach out to you guys.
Yeah, I'd say just check us out on LunarCrush.com. I mean, that's the main thing. I guess anyone listening to this, if you want a sneaky 25% off, use Lunar25 to get access to the platform. There you go, write it down. And yeah, I mean, just check us out at LunarCrush on Twitter. Search LunarCrush on YouTube. Jon's put some great videos together recently about how to use LunarCrush as an investor, as a creator. I'm at Joe Vez on Twitter. I think Jon's at Jon Farjo. Love to follow. Fire it up.
Well, let's go, guys. This was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure meeting y'all at Permissionless, and I was really happy to hop on the mic and share an hour with you guys. I had a lot of fun digging into LunarCrush, and love to talk with some degens who use some real data behind their theses.
Love it. Thanks, Dylan.
Awesome. Cheers, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in to the Smart Economy podcast. To stay in the loop with all our latest episodes and insights, head over to www.smarteconomypodcast.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of our video content. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please show your support by liking, commenting, and reviewing this episode on your favorite podcasting platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and brings even better content your way. We'd also love to hear from you. So please drop a comment on Spotify or YouTube and share which topics you'd like us to discuss and who you would like to see on the show. And if you or someone you know would make a great guest, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're always looking for fresh voices and new perspectives. And if you're a NEO token holder, please consider voting for NEO News today as your council representative. We've proudly been serving the NEO ecosystem since 2017 and will continue to do so by putting portions of our council rewards directly back into ecosystem growth initiatives. With all that said, thank you so much for taking the time to tune in to the Smart Economy podcast, and we look forward to catching you next time.